New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring. New Thought Media Network proudly presents the Science of Mind Saturday Conversations. Learn more about the Science of Mind philosophy, faith, and way of life. Join our team of experts for a weekly deep dive discussion. Come study the science of mind, chapter by chapter, and resources from the Science of Mind archives. Plan to join us every Saturday, 9 a.m. Mountain Time, only on the New Thought Media Network.
Hello, everybody. So good to see you. And I am Reverend Victoria Bomberry, and I am here in Riverside, California, in Southern California, where it is really hot recently. So I'm happy to be here right now in the morning where it's relatively cool and wonderful. And I'm really glad to be here this morning with this particular portion that I'm doing. It's putting everything together. And I thought, wow, this is a gigantic book, right? How do we put it all together? So we're looking at the general summary today and kind of weaving in my own personal coming into religious science and or new thought and religious science, and how that comes together with this incredible compilation of the writings and teachings of Ernest Holmes. And just as an introduction, I was talking to someone recently, and they had stumbled upon the Science of Mind textbook, this big book that we're reading right now. They found it, just in a bookstore somewhere, and they began to read it, and they just fell in love with the teachings, and they had no idea that there was a whole community of people who read these things, and study, and also have gatherings, have centers, have study groups, teaching chapters. I mean, all kinds of ways that people are engaging with the writings and teachings of Ernest Holmes. So generally, we think about Centers for Spiritual Living as, the folks who really delve into the teachings of Ernest Holmes, because he is the founder of that particular grouping of New Thought people. So here we are. We're finding out that these teachings go, really far and wide. And one time I was in Oklahoma at a pool party, and this was just some friends of a relative, and I was visiting from out of state, right? So they were curious about me, and they asked me, and the way that people think about ministers there is, you're a preacher, right? So they asked me what kind of preacher I was. And, that kind of gave me pause, because I don't consider myself a preacher so much as a teacher, right? Or a facilitator, or someone who is accompanying people on their spiritual journey. So that's how I see myself, and, how I interact with people. And then I said, oh, I'm a New Thought minister with the Centers for Spiritual Living. And this person got this look on their face and they said, there's ministers? And she said, I read the Science of Mind magazine. And she went on to tell me how much the Science of Mind magazine had helped her. And this is a woman who is, in Oklahoma, attending a very traditional Christian church and finding these teachings incredibly helpful to her in her life. So we don't know where all of these things end up, but they do end up in all kinds of ways in helping people. And, and people may not even be aware of, the depth and breadth of how we disseminate this information. And this is one way through the New Thought Media Network. And I'm really happy to be here for that reason. So, as we look at this, I wanted to start off with how I came into New Thought. And I came into New Thought via Unity. And I think the way that I was feeling at that time is I was very interested in prayer. And, I had a prayer practice and I wanted to amplify it. And I thought, well, I'm going to go visit the Unity. And, because I read up on it and I thought, well, I'll go visit our local Unity church and see what they have to offer. And I was really struck with the whole idea of the emphasis on affirmative prayer. And I liked that. I thought, this is something that I can get behind, right? I can feel it. And, I do want to affirm my belief in something beyond me, that divine, that thing that we call the sacred. So I started out in Unity, and I loved the affirmative prayer, and I loved being in a community that was open and receptive to all kinds of different teachings, and I felt at home there. And I think that that's sort of what calls many people into our teachings, is that ability to explore, that ability to be open to a wider look at how we express the divine while having a structure there, right? That we can go back to and use in our daily lives. And that is what this entire big book is about. It's about the practical use of these ideas that are both ancient, right, on up into the 20th century. And, it's always being augmented by our evolution of consciousness. So, Ernest Holmes did not mean this to be like the definitive word, right? Ernest Holmes encouraged us to use this as a stepping stone and to go deeper, 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 and beyond in that beautiful image that he used often of that upward spiral. And I love that. I can see that spiral just moving in that direction of the evolution of the soul. And that's the human project, really, is evolving our spirits in a way that connects us more with the divine. So that's our whole purpose, I believe, is, that kind of evolutionary process that, as Ernest Holmes reminds us, we can actively participate in. And, that doesn't mean that we are at the whim of outside forces. That means that we can actively participate in the evolution of our souls and in the evolution of the physical manifestation of this world. So here we are. We're bringing all these ideas together and looking at what is most important to each one of us. For me, the most important is prayer. So unity with with the affirmative prayer, religious science with the 5-step process. And I just have to say, unity has their 5-step process, and science of mind has their 5-step process. So they've kind of identified ways that make it easier to understand how prayer, how you can pray. And my belief is that all prayer is good, and all prayer leads us in a certain direction. And I believe that in affirmative prayer or spiritual mind treatment allows us to move in that upward spiral, to participate in this divine creation in a very powerful way. And I am let me move into something that is a little bit different, but I want to get us in this mindset of where we're moving with affirmative prayer, and also kind of contextualize how these ideas are bubbling up at a certain time in history. So we have unity, evolving out of the late 19th century New Thought, and religious science out of that late 19th century thought, and kind of blossoming throughout the 20th century into the present. And at the same time, in the realm of psychology, we have psychology developing. We have Freud and Jung coming in and, really setting kind of different aspects of psychological inquiry in motion. And remember, there wasn't a psychology until fairly recently, until the late 19th, early 20th century. That's when psychology came into existence as a discipline, an area of study. That doesn't mean that we haven't understood psychology in some sense, but that's when the discipline of psychology was originated. So I want to bring in Jung here with something that is called active imagination. And I think that it has some applicability with Unity's prayer process and with our prayer process, because active imagination is something that Jung discovered at a time when things were, the 20th century was rife with a lot of violence, war, the rise of Nazism, all of this. So Jung was really interested in how to what that meant to the human spirit, to the psyche. And he developed this whole idea of active imagination. And active imagination, the way that I'm making this link is from page 399 in the Science Mind textbook. And I'll read this paragraph, and we'll make that link between active imagination and what we do as we are praying, right? Doing a spiritual mind treatment. So Ernest Holmes writes, we should be careful to distinguish daydreaming and wistful wishing from really dynamic and creative treatment. When we treat, we do not wish, we know. We do not dream, we state. We do not hope, we accept. We do not pray, we announce. We do not expect something is going to happen. We believe that it has already happened. So this is a kind of a preparation, right? This is what we do in prayer. This is how we prepare ourselves and embody something that will be powerful because we believe it. We have that feeling behind it that causes it not to just be a daydream or wishful thought, right? It becomes a reality. So, active imagination shares with us kind of the same thing. It's not wishful thinking, it is an active embodiment and dialogue with different aspects within ourselves. So, the distinguishing factor here, so that's the commonality that active imagination has with our spiritual mind treatment. But the difference here is that, you know, there's a direct going to source within our prayers. In active imagination, we're exploring all those different aspects of ourselves. And, this distinction is kind of interesting because in reality, we are multitudes, really. We are a multitude. And all of these different aspects of ourselves, have been created by the humanity over our entire evolutionary process. So we have all of that we tap into at some point in our lives. We have that library, right, within us. And we have the ability to tap into it. So with ours, with our realization of this, we go to source, to the one, right, rather than the multitude. So that is the difference in this. We go to that one source and embody that. And when we believe, when we actually use our words in that powerful way and develop that feeling, then we are actively participating in the creative process because we have aligned ourselves with the one rather than the multitude, right? Or one of the multitude. So that's where I see kind of the difference. The active imagination is a wonderful tool to use for self-exploration, for inner dialogue, for gaining wisdom. And I think prayer, if there's a difference, this is that unification with all there is. So this is how we put this together. We are unifying with all there is, which is God. We can call it whatever we want, right? We can call it whatever we want. And, we choose as a convention to use the term God often, right, in our teachings here. But also, how did I come to this again? Well, as a Native woman, following certain kinds of philosophical and spiritual traditions, I was very, very taken with the idea of the good mind, right? And in the Haudenosaunee thought, there is something called the good mind, and we strive to unify with that, to follow a code that is the good mind. And this is where we're very similar to religious science and why I can resonate with that more. The good mind is all, exactly what it says. It's everything. It is the divine. It is all that is. It is actually, the law of, has the law written into it, and the way that Ernest Holmes has, outlined these different aspects of our existence. It fits in there. It may not be a one-to-one correspondence necessarily. However, those concepts, ideas are very similar. And I think that's where we can get our truth from, right? It happens here. This has been the realization here. This has been the realization here, and it's proven, right? We work with it and we prove it. And here's the realization over here, with all of our spiritual traditions. So that's how we come to our approximation of the truth. We approximate truth that way. It happens here, it happens here, it shows up here, it shows up here, it shows up here, and it works. So that's how we know that there's truth there. So with a good mind, there are things that we do that align ourselves with that. Our code of ethics, the way that we treat one another, the way that we pray, the way that we align with that divine. It is, kind of woven into the whole way of life. And I think that, in the modern world, we are, that's still what we're working toward. We're working toward that place where we can weave in this truth, these teachings, in a way that makes our life the good life. And the good life is for us to actively imagine, right? What does that good life look like? And, there's all kinds of political projects, right, that have come down the pike to imagine what that is and to enact it and embody it in our government. So let's look at the United States, right? The United States has a Declaration of Independence. It has a Constitution that was forged not just out of the mind of a couple of guys hanging out, right? Or several guys hanging out. This is a whole body of thought that came together to create this. How are we going to live? What do we know is true? We know that all people are created equal. That's a very spiritual statement, right? We know this. Just like we know when we're treating that all people are that perfection, that emanation of God, right? So this is right there and in the thought of these people who wrote this down to found a new nation, right? So we do have these kinds of things that guide us, right? They're systematized and they are set there to guide us. Now, we're in very interesting times right now, and I think that we always have to go back to that part of ourselves as individuals and as a collectivity where we do re-examine. Where are we right now? What's our meter here to create a good life for everyone? Because in our teachings, right, we do our prayer work, our treatment, our spiritual mind treatment, or in unity, the affirmative prayer, to create our good life for ourselves and also for our communities. We work on the individual in relation to all the kinship that we have and that interbeing in the way that Thich Nhat Hanh puts it, the interbeingness of our reality. Now, in Indigenous belief as well, we believe in that interconnectedness of all life. And even beyond that, everything is sacred and must be treated as sacred. So we have these values, we have these ideas that we want to use and put into practice. And, here it is echoed inside the mind. We treat for this to align with the perfection of the divine. So you see the echoes here? We're echoing, echoing, echoing. We're treating to align with that perfect plan of life. And there's certain laws that we that are there that we follow in order to achieve that. So just in the spiritual mind treatment, is kind of a microcosm really for how we can live our life in prayer, and the Bible says, pray without ceasing. And that just means to align with God without ceasing. Always be in alignment with God. Be there. Be aware. Be enmeshed in the divine. Don't get distracted, Know that this is where we are. We are creating that goodness. And not individually, right? We are co-creating that goodness because we are aligned with God. And Ernest Holmes reminds us. I want to say this so that we know it. And this is on page 401. If at times we doubt our ability to use the law, we should remind ourselves that it is not I, but the Spirit of the Father in me who doeth the work. This will straighten our thought and place us again on the road of faith and understanding. We must believe. We must learn how to believe. We should treat ourselves until we do believe. No one ever started at the top. Let us be happy to begin right where we are and grow. So this is about a growth process, right, that goes on for lifetimes. And it doesn't mean that we might achieve a certain kind of perfection here, but there's always this promise of more enlightenment, something that is beyond this physical realm that we can achieve. We will achieve it. And in fact, we've already achieved it as being embodied beings here on this plane. So we've got these different things happening with different thoughts, and yet they resonate and come back to create a body of truth. So in the 5 steps of prayer for unity, they talk about relaxation. To relax, the first thing is to relax. The next is to concentrate. The next is to meditate. The next is to realize, and then to give thanks. So this echoes, the Science of Mind 5 steps of treatment too. And, recognition, unification, realization, thankfulness, and release. So, basically they're mirror images of one another. So that is what we teach. And, these are guidelines for us to use as we are in prayer. But if we look at both of these, the whole object of this is to align with the divine. That's what prayer is, aligning with the divine. All prayer is that. This is a method, a technique for doing that. And if we look at Buddhist teachings, it's the same. And they may not set a deity out there, but it is aligning with that which is the ground of all being. So it's all all of these spiritual teachings have that as the object, right? We do that. We align with the divine. And I wanted to look at this whole idea of, I'm talking about the good life, right? And a successful life, right? So that he writes, Ernest Holmes writes on page 400, the idea of a successful life will create success. Okay, so we want to say, well, what is that? What is success, right? And this idea will find objective form in the outer world of the one who holds to it with conviction. It must first become established in the conscious mind. It will then transmit itself into the subjective embodiment. And when this happens, success will become habitual. So this sounds very simple, right? Very, very simple. And yet, what are we going to define as success? That's our work, right? How do we define success? And right now, when, all around us, how is success defined? Well, when I look at social media, I don't really look at how many followers someone has. And sometimes I don't even know, oh, this person is famous. I have no idea. There's something that I just like about them, right? And I resonate with them. And yet, we can get to the point where we are, oh, they're successful because they have 10 million followers. They have gotten 150,000 hits in the first 3 minutes of this post, so in that world of social media, that's sort of where we're gauging what is success. And yet, what is success other than being who we are, aligning with spirit, and living however that out pictures for us? Success is something that is in service always to something greater. It's not just this individual, right? It's not just the doing of the individual in a vacuum. It is our activity in service to the whole. That's what success is. How do we do that? How do we serve the whole? How do we get out of the way and align with the divine and move forward in creating that good life, not only for ourselves, but for everyone? And Ernest Holmes, always tells us, do no harm. Don't hurt people. There's a wide variety of things that you can do that bring value to everyone. And in our global vision with Centers for Spiritual Living, we say just that. We want to create a world that works for everyone. This is the vision. This is what we look at. We want to create that. And some people will throw up their hands and say, that's impossible. How do you create a world that works for everyone? Well, we do it step by step, bite by bite, right? As the whole old adage about how do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite, right? That's what we do. We do it step by step. But we do need to do our inner work to have that outer work be whole and complete. So I kind of want to end this by going to 427. And, the teachings of Jesus are kind of interwoven in the first, this first part of the book. And, up to 422, right? And then there's the final conclusion. And then the teachings of Jesus. And when we're thinking about success, right? Um, what is success? Right now, I kind of alluded to success as fame, money, power, uh, with, using social media as an example. But we can take that out into, the business world, into, the world of government, finance, all of that kind of thing. And kind of look at this, what is success? There's people that we admire, right, who are working within these systems in a way that they want to create good for all, right? There's others who are working with it within the system to want to create a good life for themselves and their friends. And that's a big, that's a huge, there's a huge divide between that. And I think it's interesting to look that Ernest Holmes is adamant about using Jesus as a model, right, of a spiritually realized teacher. In fact, he says, the world has not produced another like him, and until it does, he must receive a unique place in the history of human character. So Jesus lived about 2,000 years ago. Before that, there was that infusion of the Buddha. And, we have these teachers who are these enlightened beings who have come to humankind over the millennia, right? Those are two well known personages. There are others that may not be as well known, but they have contributed to this whole upleveling of our consciousness. And yet, here Ernest Holmes is being, he starts by using Matthew 4:4. Man shall not live by bread alone. Okay, this outer world, right? So, what did Jesus teach? It is written that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. Who eats bread alone will continually hunger. To the physical benefits of the human board must be added the spiritual strength of divine wisdom. That's where he starts with the teaching of God. We have to have that spiritual strength of divine wisdom. And what is that divine wisdom as we experience it when we align with God? We understand that what I do affects the whole, right? My actions affects the whole of creation. A few years ago there was that insight, that the flapping of the butterfly's wing has an effect thousands and thousands of miles away, right? So that was kind of a moment for people who heard that. Yes, what we do, no matter how small it appears to be, does have an effect on the whole. And we are actively, when we are awake and alive in spirit, we're actively contributing to that goodness. When we're kind of shaded and not fully realized, we can do things that are outside of that, right? Outside of that reality. So we have to have that spiritual strength of divine wisdom. And right after that, he quotes Matthew 5:5, the meek shall inherit the earth. And he says, this is a teaching of non resistance. Warlords and plunderers of human possessions have come and gone. Kingdoms have risen only to crumble to dust and become numbered with past events. Passion and lust for power have strewn the earth with destruction. It would seem as though the meek had lost out in the titanic struggle for temporal supremacy. How powerful is that? Temporal supremacy. It's fleeting. It doesn't last. It is not truth. Temporal supremacy is an illusion, right? In the midst of this drama of human existence, Jesus declared that the meek shall inherit the earth. Let us inquire if this teaching is a true one. Do we teach our children to follow the steps of a Caesar and a Napoleon? Or do we tell them the story of Jesus or Buddha? The cross is mightier than the crown, and we teach our children that love masters everything. The meek shall inherit the earth. To whom have our artists turned for inspiration and that quickening power which enables them to depict the ideal? Not to the warlords, nor even the captains of industry, but to the meek. So love masters everything. It inspires everything to that high ideal. He goes on to say, what characteristics are set before us as being worthy? Have not faith and belief in the divine goodness been the theme of our greatest singers? Who could write a beautiful story about hell? But heaven and love have inspired thousands to the uplifting of humanity. Jesus was right when he said that the meek shall inherit the earth. They have done so and will continue to do so. That's where the good life is, in doing the everyday activities of life with love and beauty at the core. You know, there's a whole teaching of beauty way within indigenous cultures, walking that path of beauty, seeing that beauty all around, being in alignment with the divine, not going outside of the original instructions of the Creator, not beyond those laws, not crossing those laws, but being aligned with them, having them as the guide for our lives. So, as we move forward in our exploration of these teachings, let's keep that in mind. This is not just for our own glorification, right? That we do this work. We do this work because we are actively engaged in this journey of aligning with the divine. If we fall off the path a little bit, or even really far away, we can always get back on and we move forward. We have just made an error. We can correct that error and get back on the path. And that may mean that we do repair work. We might have to do a lot of repair work on our way on this path. But we do it, and we do it gladly and with exaltation, because we can see that truth, that we are the living embodiment of the divine. So, everyone, thank you so much for being here today. and being with us on this exploration of our teachings. And, I am so thrilled every time I get to talk with you because we are doing this step by step, right? And I would love it if you join us and send us some ideas about what you're thinking about and how you've applied these teachings to your life. So, everyone, this is New Thought Media Network. And as always, your support means so much to us. And I love you. Have a wonderful week.